Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My guest, the Olympics commentator and host, Bob Costas. Bob, thanks for joining me.
Aaron, how are you?
I'm fine. It's great. You do Football Night in America as well. You've won 27 Emmys and counting. Is there anything you haven't done?
That I'm allowed to talk about? Anything I haven't done professionally? Nothing that I'm dying to do, let's put it that way.
You've authored a book. You're a commentator on the MLB network as well. How do you keep so fit? What's your regular workout, Bob?
So that's your first question. You know what you try to do when you're on the road, what's difficult on the road is just establishing a routine. There is no routine. Almost anybody would be happy to swap places with me. A lot of it's been a dream come true. But if you're asking about a routine, there's no, people say, what's your normal day like? Every day is different. You know, it's not a 9-to-5 job. Planes arrive at different times. You check in and out of hotels. You just do the best you can.
That's why it's a great job. All right, talk about politics and sports in terms of as competitions. What are some of the similarities? What are some of the differences? And certainly, you know, you've heard in politics, all's fair in love, war in politics.
Sports, one of the things that distinguishes it is that the playing field is supposed to be level, and generally it is, and the competition takes place under agreed upon rules. Now, does that mean that a ball might not hit a pebble, or that some fluke thing might happen and that the best team always wins, or the best competitor always wins, or that all the calls are always correct, even with the help of technology? No. Chance factors in. But by and large, sports is a meritocracy. Other aspects of life are a little bit more of a roll of the dice.
How about all the controversy with the Olympics in terms of the administration of the Olympics, the bribery scandal and all that? How do you think that's affected the Olympics? And also, what kind of tone does that set for athletes when they see the people at the top taking millions of dollars, that type of thing?
All those who say that you can separate politics from sports, especially in the case of the Olympics, must be on some other planet. There's always a political aspect to the Olympics. Sometimes it's more intrusive than other times, but you can't have an Olympics in Sochi, Russia, and not realize that the specter of Vladimir Putin looms over those Olympics. And you can't do an Olympics in Rio without mentioning that the Russian track and field athletes were absent because of a systemic, sophisticated, state-sponsored doping program, which is different. We're not naive. We're not saying Americans are all clean, but that's different from individuals breaking the rules with the help of rogue chemists, as opposed to it being something that was instituted by their own government, by their own nation. So all those things have to be discussed. You don't talk about them as the most dramatic part of the competition is unfolding. It doesn't intrude, or shouldn't, on the theater, the drama, the competition. But you need to mention these things because they're part of the fabric of it, for better or worse.
In that vein, performance-enhancing drugs, what's the challenge there, in your opinion?
Well, it's a cliche, but the cheaters are always one step ahead of the drug police, it seems. But one of the best developments in recent years is that they can freeze samples and go back and check. They can catch you after the fact, and they can start to get genetic markers on you. What's your actual baseline of testosterone to epitestosterone relationship, that sort of thing? What's your baseline? So that if there's a weird jump, unless it can be in some way explained, then you've got cause for suspicion and maybe even for conviction. So they're getting more and more sophisticated about it. And team sports in the United States, especially baseball, which lagged behind for a long time, and so its record book poisoned as a result, they're getting more serious, not just about investigation, but about punishment. And you find that the athletes themselves they used to kind of stand back. We know what's going on, but don't bother us with it. Now, athletes themselves are more adamant about wanting a level playing field. Will that ever ensure that we'll have 100% pure competition? No. But just because you have traffic laws, that doesn't mean someone doesn't run a red light or speed. But without those laws, you'd have chaos. And so I think we're moving closer to, well, at least we can mitigate the use of drugs. And when drugs are a factor, if it's discovered after the fact, harsh and severe penalties can be meted out.
What about the concept of having some kind of uniformity when it comes to drug, what's allowed, what's not allowed? Because different sports have different rules.
Well, they have players' associations too. international sports, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, that's one thing. But the NFL has its own players association, the NBA, Major League Baseball. They can move closer to kind of a consensus on what should be tested for, how that testing should be administered, what the penalties should be. But they're all separate organizations.
What about the idea on at the other extreme of not having any prohibitions?
I can understand the impulse there. It's since you can't ever be 100% clean across the board, there'll always be some cheaters that slip through the cracks, at least for the time being. They might be caught further down the road. Just give up. Who cares? And there's a lot of people who think, well, you know, if the home run record was 90, that would be more exciting. These people are not terribly bright, but they think this. The problem with allowing anybody to take anything they want is that it forces everyone else to either do the same or fall hopelessly behind competitively. And so you're forcing others to make an ethical choice that they might not make on their own, and they don't know necessarily what the health consequences are. If every restriction was off, then people would be using full-blown metabolic steroids and heaven knows what else in the pursuit of immediate results without any real regard for what the consequences are going to be down the road, and you'd be forcing other competitors to either fall behind or do the same thing, consequences be damned. When you think it through, it doesn't really make much sense.
In fact, you know, it's interesting, your comment about being able to be competitive. One of the things that Lance Armstrong, when asked, you know, given your advantages physically, you know, did you really have to take drugs? And his response was, to be competitive,
yes,
I had to. I thought that
well, it's interesting that in some sports, if the winner is eliminated, the gold medal goes to the person who finished second. In the case of the Tour de France, they didn't bother with that because they knew as a practical matter, to find someone they could be sure was clean, they might have to go to the 25th or 26th guy. And that is an argument that people have made on behalf of Lance Armstrong, that literally everyone involved was cheating to some extent. And if no one was cheating, then given his level of skill, will, determination, et cetera, then he would have prevailed. Maybe with less impressive times, but he would have prevailed. But that's an argument that can't be proven.
Right. Well, and how about the motivation to take performance-enhancing drugs? Just because, I mean, and as you've seen it over the years, extraordinary amount of money involved when you're at the top of your sport.
Well, what it can do is it can sustain a career, and that's millions of dollars. It can be the difference between being a bench player and a starter, between being a starter and a star, between being a star and a Hall of Famer, between being a minor leaguer and someone who gets a big league contract and maybe a big league pension. If you talk about baseball, some of the drug users who have been nabbed, when you really think about what the consequence was, okay, they sat out 50 games, then they signed free agent contracts that were much larger than the contracts they were playing under when they used the PEDs, which is why there's a movement within baseball for the first offense to be a full season and the second offense lifetime ban, so that someone can't make the calculation, you know, it'll be worth it. Even if I'm caught, it'll be worth it. Well, if the penalties become harsher and if a lifetime ban comes sooner, then maybe you get a greater deterrent.
All right, last question. Something I call the Lance Armstrong effect, which is, you know, Lance used PEDs, denied it vehemently, went after people who were telling the truth and ruined a number of careers. Now when an athlete is accused, I think in the court of public opinion, there's an assumption that you're guilty, and if you deny it, a lot of people...
Well, the person telling the truth, the theoretical person telling the truth, is going to say the very same thing that the person who was lying said. And I think that realization has finally sunk in with a lot of athletes. Wait a second, we're all performing under this cloud of suspicion. It isn't just the guilty, there's a guilt by association thing here. And I think where this really has gained momentum, at least in team sports in the United States, it's gained momentum from the ball players who are fed up with that atmosphere and who don't want to be painted with a broad brush.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Bob Costas.
Sports starkly presents a pursuit of excellence. Talent is a gift, but the pursuit of excellence is an expression of character.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Because I've never done endorsements or commercials, people ask how are our programs funded, especially because we provide them as a public service to all our broadcast outlets. It's expensive to produce our show, whether we do them here in Denver or go to places such as Aspen, Washington, D.C., or even Iraq. The answer is we depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to help allow us to continue to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, just go to dmefd.org. The DMEF is a tax-exempt public charitable organization and has promised to dedicate 100% of every contribution to support our public affairs initiatives. If you believe as I do in the need for a forum which promotes civil discourse and mutually respectful discussion, I hope you'll decide to make a contribution today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at www.harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're with Bob Costas of NBC. So Bob, one of the things I'm interested in is just the concept, starting off with the concept of athletes as role models, because a lot of them don't want to be role models. Right. Give me your take on what you've seen and your sense of what the reality is.
I think a sophisticated adult perspective on this is do your job in a professional way. Carry yourself with a little bit of dignity. That doesn't mean you don't enjoy yourself, that you're not exuberant, but don't carry yourself like a jackass. Show up on time and try and keep your name out of the police blotter. Apart from that, a reasonable person shouldn't care. You can find your role models elsewhere. Parents, teachers, people you know well. On the other hand, there are the occasional athletes who go above and beyond their sport, and so far as we know, we can take some inspiration from that or find something admirable in that. And then there's also this. Sports starkly presents a pursuit of excellence. Talent is a gift, but the pursuit of excellence is an expression of character. So in that sense, someone like, let's say like Michael Jordan, who chose never to be involved in social causes, the way Arthur Ashe was involved in social causes, or Muhammad Ali, or Jim Brown, or Kurt Flood, or Billie Jean King, or even LeBron now, baby steps. But Michael never chose to do that. But you could say he was a role model in this one respect. Even after he was already established as the greatest player, he still tried to get better. He still was striving for excellence at every turn. You can take that as something worthy of emulating. You could look at Cal Ripken Jr. showing up for work every day, no matter how he felt, and say, that's a devotion to craft. And you could apply that in some way to your own life. That doesn't mean you worship these people or think they're perfect. We should get our enjoyment from watching talented people do what they do better than 99.9% of the rest of the world, and competing in often dramatic and exciting ways. That's enough. I don't need to take moral guidance from athletes by and by.
All right. Moral guidance aside, one of the things that has surprised me just year in, year out is where you have top caliber athletes often heading to a major competition, it may be the Super Bowl even, or the Olympics, yet you're reading in the newspaper that they're out partying to 2 a.m. or getting into trouble. And I guess my question is, what's the thought process?
There's not much thought, obviously, but they're by and large very young people, testosterone fueled. They are wealthy at a time in their lives when most people, even if they ultimately will be wealthy, aren't wealthy at that age. They're not surrounded by as many enablers. They haven't been treated as if they were entitled from day one. So do all athletes take the wrong path? No, not even most. But we're going to hear about those who do, because they're bold-faced names. And given the combination of factors that I just laid out, it's almost inevitable that some are going to do what young people do. It's just that they're going to have more money, and when they get in trouble, we're going to hear about it more readily than when Joe Blow gets in trouble.
All right, speaking of hearing about it, incidents of domestic violence don't seem to have, well, they haven't been eliminated. What are different sports trying to do, and what do you think the problem is, or is it just as you just described?
Well, you're asking me to go beyond my expertise. I'm not a sociologist, but obviously if you play a sport like football, a certain number of football players, by no means a majority, but a certain number, are not going to be able to confine the belligerence and aggression that is fundamental to the sport. They're not going to be able to confine it to the field. Then if you combine that with head trauma, we already know a lot about the long-range results of head trauma. We're learning more and more about the short-term results in terms of impulse control and effect on aggression. If you mix that with performance-enhancing drugs, if you mix it with painkillers, if you throw alcohol into the mix, you're stirring up a witch's brew here. So it's entirely possible that someone who plays a sport like football might be more inclined toward domestic violence than those who play other sports. Generally speaking, athletes are arrested less often than other people in their same demographic group. On the other hand, when you talk about the NFL, by far, the offense that is most prevalent is domestic violence. So there's some connection there, but again, that connection involves an observable minority of players, but not anything close to the majority of players.
What do you think, whether it be the NFL or other leagues, the policy should be in terms of tolerance?
Well, they're moving closer and closer to a zero tolerance policy. At least zero tolerance, I guess, would be one strike and you're out. That's not going to happen. But there are consequences, and the leagues are evolving. I think this issue has come to the fore more in the last 2-3 years, and all leagues have responded, I think, partly out of conscience and partly out of a public relations concern. So if you're found, everyone deserves their day in court, but if you're found to have been involved in a domestic violence incident, there's going to be a price to pay beyond what the judicial system imposes. There's going to be a price to pay from your league.
And I always try to think about a coach's influence. How much a team can control a player. Obviously, the limitations are pretty significant.
I think it varies from coach to coach, from team to team, relationship to relationship. All these leagues bring in counselors. These are, after all, young people. Counsel them on how to manage your money, the type of associations that would be productive and those that might not be so smart. And that includes tutorials, for lack of a better word, on domestic violence, on attitudes toward women, on the consequences of this kind of misbehavior. Obviously, it doesn't always work, but we hope that some of those are listening and some of those involved are listening and taking it to heart.
All right, speaking of coaches, what in your opinion makes a great coach? And what have you observed in terms of coaches who have really impressed you, any in particular, across sports?
Well, strategy is always a part of it, but I think almost all coaches and managers will tell you that relationships with players, creating a team culture, a clubhouse culture, managing people rather than managing the game is actually more important. That doesn't mean it isn't important when you decide to double switch or which defense you employ at a certain point in a football game. But I think it's managing people and creating a team culture that's the most important attribute of a good coach or manager.
What are some coaches that really stand out for you, and tell me why?
Well, historically, I think if you took a poll, you'd get a lot of names, but I think the consensus would be that John Wooden was the greatest coach overall because his teams won 10 championships in, I think, a 12-season span. They had 88 and 47 game winning streaks. They played a disciplined style. There was a philosophy behind it that was consistent. His combination of success and adherence to certain principles, I think puts him at the top, for lack of a better choice. But could you prove, since it's subjective, could you prove that John Wooden was a better basketball coach than Bill Walsh or Bill Belichick or Vince Lombardi or Don Shula in their own context were football coaches? Could you prove that? It'd be difficult to prove. And also it's difficult to just base it on championships won, because some very good managers or coaches had lesser personnel than their contemporaries. It's a complicated mixture of factors that goes into it.
All right, we're going to take our last break, and we'll be right back with Bob.
If you're doing a network telecast, what you're trying to do is capture the atmosphere, the excitement, appreciate what you're seeing in front of you, help people enjoy it and understand it a little bit better, give both sides due credit. You're not rooting for anybody.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. We depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's and world's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to allow us to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, please go to dmefd.org. Thanks for watching the show and for your support. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Join me and watch the Aaron Harber Show.
Watch the Aaron Harper Show.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show.
Watch the Aaron Harper Show.
Watch the Aaron Harper Show.
I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch the Aaron Harper Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at www.harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're with Bob Costas. Bob, baseball, I know you're passionate about the sport. What's your favorite team?
Well, growing up, my favorite team was the Yankees, because when I first began to learn baseball, the Dodgers and the Giants had left New York. The Mets didn't exist yet. So the Yankees were not only the only team in New York, but they were always the best team. They were always in the World Series. So that was a team I rooted for as a kid. I can honestly say that for years and years now, I haven't had a passionate rooting interest in any team. I've spent most of my adult life in St. Louis, so I feel an affinity for the St. Louis Cardinals. But it's not difficult to put any of those feelings aside when you're broadcasting a game to a national audience. If you're doing a network telecast, what you're trying to do is capture the atmosphere, the excitement, appreciate what you're seeing in front of you, help people enjoy it and understand it a little bit better, give both sides due credit. You're not rooting for anybody. So that's not where I'm coming from anymore. I still love the game. I love baseball. I'm interested in baseball, but I'm not rooting hard for one team or another.
What about how the game's changed over the last several decades? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's a broad subject. I think they've moved over the last decade a lot closer to some sort of fairness in the competition. Some of that has to do with revenue sharing. Some of it has to do with, even though they don't have a salary cap, there is a luxury tax, which has held some teams at the top of the revenue chart in check a little bit. Plus, Moneyball techniques and sophisticated analytics have helped teams with lesser resources figure out a way to be competitive, at least over short periods of time. When you have 3 divisions and now 2 wild cards, there are different paths to the playoffs, and once you get to the playoffs, even if a team has been better than you over 162, in a best of 5 or a best of 7, any team good enough to get into the playoffs is capable of winning a best of 5 or best of 7 against a team that might be better than them over the long haul. So it's a much more competitive situation and much closer to an equal situation than it was, let's say, at the turn of the 21st century.
What's your take on or thoughts about long-term contracts? I mean, we've seen so many players sign long-term contracts and then they don't seem to do quite as well.
Well, I think that teams are recalibrating. During the height or depth, however you want to refer to it, of the steroid era, there were a lot of long-term contracts given to players who would be past their mid-30s, even into their late 30s, early 40s by the time those contracts ended. You're seeing fewer and fewer of those contracts now, or those contracts have clauses where the team can opt out at a certain point, because absent steroids and also absent amphetamines, which have also been banned, it's harder and harder for a 37, 38, 39-year-old guy to put up the kind of numbers that he's getting under this long-term contract that he put up in the first place to help him get that contract. So I think it's just a matter of teams having a different philosophy and a different awareness of where the value lies. You're seeing fewer contracts of 7, 8, 9 years for players. But are players still handsomely compensated? Yeah, and that's not going to stop. The revenues in sports are high enough that the players should share in it significantly, and they do.
I would think, and speaking of revenues, I mean, one of the really fascinating aspects of technology and what's happened is, of course, the fact that a lot of people can watch programs and skip ads, which advertisers aren't excited about. Live sports, however, has a huge attraction that it's much more difficult to skip the ads. And so you have huge revenues coming in. I assume you're going to see player salaries keep going up.
Well, player salaries are always going to be, at minimum, 50% of the annual revenues of the sport, and sometimes more than that. So I don't think any sophisticated fan should have a problem with what players make, as long as what they make doesn't destroy a competitive structure. If every team has at least a reasonable chance to be competitive, with a dash of luck and with smart management, then it shouldn't matter to you any more than it matters to you what Brad Pitt makes for a movie if you enjoy the movie and the movie is well made. Saying, well, you know, so-and-so makes more in a week than Stan Musial made for a season, that's just an old-timer's lament. If the sport can sustain it, and the proof is that it can, otherwise they wouldn't pay it, I don't have much of a problem with it.
With all the sports that, I mean, you've observed, that you've been a commentator on, is there any sport that you enjoy more than others, just from a professional commentating?
I've always liked baseball the best. Baseball is my favorite sport, and it's a different kind of sport for a broadcaster because the pace of the game allows you to be more anecdotal and to make historical references and to have a different type of relationship with the other person in the booth, more of a conversational relationship rather than call a play and the other guy analyzes and breaks down the play, then you're back to calling the play. There's a different kind of flow in baseball.
How about the way, not just commentating, but the way the coverage of sports has changed? I mean, you've seen an extraordinary evolution just in terms of technology. What are some of the advances you really like, and what are some of the challenges it presents you as a commentator?
The pictures are ever more arresting with HD TV and widescreen plasma televisions. The technology is fantastic. We can slow things down now to super slow motion. You can see it to within a millimeter. The kind of call at second base where safer out, well, good enough, was close, bang, bang, play. That's the way he called it. Well, now you can take a look on a challenge or whatever. All those things are for the better. I think what's sometimes the flip side of that is if producers and directors fall in love with all the bells and whistles, then the simple, pure storytelling can be affected. Vin Scully doesn't need all those bells and whistles to draw you into a baseball game. So there has to be a balance between just letting the game play out and enhancing it, but not overwhelming the audience with all the new technology, all the graphics, all the statistics, all the facts and figures. They all have their place, but you still have to pick and choose where they belong.
All right, Bob, thanks so much.
You're welcome, Aaron.
All right, that was Bob Costas. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.